Looks can be ever so deceiving. They can fool even the strongest of individuals. Take that as you will from someone who spends most of their time wearing disguises. If I were to tell you there was a child in the midst of a war, ever so alone and running for his life, you would feel sorry for this child. You would want to do something and help said defenseless child? Don't bother saying you wouldn't, because I know you would. But what if I were to tell you that this child would grow up to be a ruthless dictator with a bloodlust like no other? Perhaps you may still want to help him. Perhaps you might foolishly believe that you can help the poor child. But what if I were to reveal that child was indeed older than he looks? What if I were to say he is older and far more intelligent than the likes of you? Now you feel less guilty about doing nothing and can move forward with your pitiful, small life. No? Still believe in helping the boy? How righteous of you. Now, what if I were to reveal that the child is me? What if I were to tell you that the child is the master? Now, it is a different tale, isn't it? I see you backing away from your screen, knowing that you can't help nor change him. In truth, he doesn't need your help. The war has given him a new purpose. It has given me a new purpose. And now you can't escape. Now you are hooked. And now you will listen to me. And I know you will. For I am the master. And this is the story of my forgotten life. I have had many faces, so many lives. Some truly evil, some taken from others. A few innocent ones here and there. I have been a snake a few times, a trochanite, an android. Who knows how many times I've been a crispy husk? I have been American, Canadian, trochanite, a war chief, a warlord, a president, a ruler. I have had an incarnation that even I regret, but we don't talk about that abomination. And a few lives here and there in which even I am uncertain of. I believe my psychiatrist would call it moral ambiguity. It is a shame that they are no longer around after the incident. Oh, I suppose you want to hear about the forgotten life I was talking about, huh? Curious to find out what happened to that lost child, are we? Feeling guilty? Or are we still reluctant to admit that deep down, you don't care for me even as a child, as you listen to me now? All you feel is disgust and fear. Given my reputation, believe it or not, I understand your fear of me. I understand the grudge you hold against me, and you are right to. The question is, Not if you would help said child, or a silly little question such as you have the right to take that child's life before they became evil. No. My question is, who would take that risk? It obviously isn't you. Who would take the risk and save the child despite who they are and what they are destined to become? For even as this child, I was the monster that everybody loves to hate. The pantomime villain doesn't know he is the pantomime villain, and is stuck in a constant loop. But this panto villain is aware of the puppet strings attached to him. This panto villain is more than your ordinary panto villain. The puppet strings attached to me are being controlled by Death herself. And unlike Time, who fled the Time War, Death, much like myself, relishes within the Time War. Me as her champion, and she leads me into battle. There was once a time in which this was a burden, but then I accepted it. And now I see our relationship as more of a fated partnership. Now, what does that have to do with the child, I hear you all begging to know? Well, let me get to that. I theorize that every time I break free from the puppet strings, whether intentional or unintentional, I am forced back into my old ways, or murdered once again. Now, what if this forgotten incarnation of mine actually did break those strings? I have vivid nightmares of me standing with my old friend and fighting the war alongside him and that companion of his. He always has a companion with him, even in war. This time, in my nightmares, we would commit genocide together and destroy our foes alongside one another. It was similar to what we discussed as Time taught. He wanted to travel the universe, while I wanted to conquer it all and watch it burn beneath us. Naturally, this tore us apart alongside another incident with a bully of ours. But in theory, it would all lead to this point, the fall of the righteous and the rise of the monsters. For that is what he was now, and it is and always will be what I am destined to be. It is my nature. They are all faint memories of what I possibly was. What I truly remember was running through that battlefield, being aged to death and being reverted to a baby within seconds as I tried to rush past a Dalek horde and through the unfathomable army of the fractured souls. It all seems like a distant memory, and a memory yet to come. I would often take the time to sightsee and look around at the glorious death and destruction occurring around me. But if I were to tell you the truth, and I may as well because you won't escape me to tell anyone, I was ever so slightly afraid of the war. That is to say, I was vulnerable. I utilized that fear and pain to my advantage, and butchered as many life forms as I could. This wasn't my first venture into the Time War, at least as far as I can remember, but my first battle will always stay locked within my mind as one of my many victories. I was in my previous incarnation, and wore a suit. I was bold as far as I can recall, and I had a habit of being witty. Some things never change. Now, where was I? Or when? I suppose you can never be too careful with the latter question, especially during a time war. While running through this battlefield, I utilized the tools around me as living shields, if you will, constantly avoiding bombardments, claws, swords, teeth, time fractures, paradoxes, Daleks, Vaga plants, and death rays. All very amusing ways of trying to murder little old me. I don't remember much else. This war has a way of messing with your mind, turning your memories inside out, and often using them as weapons against you. I admire the concept, but it is rather inconvenient when it happens to be my memories they toy with. I only remember falling in the everlasting darkness I was falling into. It surrounded me and almost consumed me as I felt as if I was looking into my soul, and it was gazing through me. I remember watching as it manifested into death herself. It had been a while, and I knew she had her eye on me at all times. Within the battlefield was now a table and 2 chairs. She waved towards them and sat me down. I don't remember what was said, but I remember us both gazing through the shields that now surrounded us and looking towards the many onslaughts. A gleeful smile was plastered on my face as I turned towards her. I sipped my tea as she sipped hers, and she closed her eyes. I closed mine alongside her, and within my mind, we were both in a dark void. I loved the darkness when I was a time tot, and often sat with the doctor, who was afraid of it. But there was something so enchanting about it, and the fear that I would experience back then. I often wondered why it did, but as I grew older, it became clear that the darkness was a part of me. The question within my mind was clear to me as it is now. What is my purpose in this war? It was then that a hand reached out to me, and I was no longer alone in the battlefield. And that is where I met the only man in this universe who would dare help me, dare help that lonely little child lost within the wall, unlike you, who stood and watched, or listened, shall we say. This man is an old friend of mine, and my greatest opponent bar myself. Our feud is known across the universe, and one day we shall resume said feud. I have mentioned him a few times during this tale, but this time was different. This time he wasn't who I once knew, and was a prime example of how nobody can escape this war. In a previous life, he went by the name of the Doctor, but during the war, he decided to ditch said title, but made the mistake of not choosing another name. I recall finding that stupid and not really understanding the decision, but the fool was always so sentimental, shall we say. I don't remember much of what happened after that. I remember regenerating, and in my mind, I swore that I would enact my vengeance upon the Doctor, and a being named the Squire. Once again, I don't remember much, but bear with me. I think it was in this time that I cut my strings and for once stood with the Doctor as my nightmare suggested. I am not too sure, but as I mentioned, I can't stand with the Doctor again, and I don't want to. At least, not for the moment. The memories I could be talking about, this very incarnation that I believe I was at some point, could just be me reciting a dream. And if so, what does that dream mean? For I know that this incarnation, although as evil as I am now, he had good in him, and what happened? Perhaps I have had an incarnation that is morally ambiguous. And if so, is that what I am? Does it matter? I don't want to be that. And quite frankly, it means nothing to me whether that incarnation exists or not. I somewhat remember my regeneration from the child to who I am now. I can't remember whether that regeneration was a retro-regeneration or a normal one. There are so many paradoxes in this war to the point at which my very existence is one. In truth, I don't know when this child was me, or when I was this child, or if I am still this child. The war has scrambled my timelines many a time, more than I am used to, and it is a matter of fact that my timelines were already a continuity nightmare. But this incarnation is a product of war, as is this one. At the time, I declared myself within my mind as my 17th incarnation. But I was, and still am, lying to myself. I have lost count of how many different faces and lives I have led. Truthfully speaking, my timeline is a mess even to myself. One second I am the war chief, and the next I am not. Let's not delve into the monk connection, shall we? This time was different. Even now, I feel my life being unwritten and rewritten again and again. Again and again. Perhaps it shall never stop, even after the war. Perhaps the paradoxes shall continue and my life shall get even more convoluted. Perhaps it doesn't matter if everything in this time war can be undone. If linear time no longer exists, then perhaps no actions have consequences. And perhaps this is my purpose. I am a monster, and there is no better place for a monster than the heart of the battle, among the meaningless blood of the innocent and the decaying corpses of the other monsters that I have brutally torn apart. I knew I was brought back for a reason. That reason being to play the many games of the corrupt and decadent fools that deem themselves superior to me, aka the Time Lords. But this time is different. Not only was I brought back by the Time Lords, but death has shown me my soul, and now I know what I must become. This time, nothing matters. And perhaps, just perhaps, I can use that to my advantage. For war is a mere game, and this time I am going to be victorious. For I am Death's champion, and I shall win this game.